Good day. This is Tony Ballinger from the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. It's my pleasure to have on board today Martin Craemer. Many of you will know him from his own podcast, which is called Five Romeo Romeo, which is obviously the phonetical letter for R. So it's 5RR. He served in 5RR. He's got a very nice podcast, as I've mentioned, and we'll give the link to that at the end of the story here. Because he's given several hundred talks from his own perspective on the Rhodesian army and life in Rhodesia, and they're very interesting, and I would encourage you to go and listen to them, but we'll give you the link later on. Martin, hello, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tony, and thank you so much for the kind words.
It's a pleasure. It's lovely having you on board. I love your style in your podcasts. They're sort of, lazy, like you would put on your favorite slippers and get a glass of whiskey and sit by a fire and listen to you regale these stories from our lovely heritage. So I thought it would be a good idea to chat to you and have your face on the camera for a change. And so here we go. Tell us a bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
Tony, I was actually born here in South Africa, but we went to Rhodesia when I was very young, and so for all intents and purposes, I've regarded myself as a Rhodesian. I don't have that much in the way of recollection of my life here in South Africa, but we went to Yankee in the very early 1950s, and it was a wonderful place for a lad to grow up. I thoroughly enjoyed myself there. It was pretty primitive in those days. I mean, there was a little kiosk on the railway station where you could buy cool drinks and so on, and there'd always be a cluster of Africans there with polished tins full of peanuts, ground nuts that they'd roast, and I remember that quite fondly. And then up on the hill there was a general store, if I can describe it that way, by the name of Broughton's. And there you could buy a little bit more in the way of groceries. But once a month, most families would get on the train and travel down to Bulawayo. And so the train would leave in the evening and you travel through the night. And that too, I thoroughly enjoyed. We had these old coaches, with like a balcony on either end of it. And nothing's nicer than standing there in the cool evening air as you travel down. And it's quite a long journey. I mean, you get to Bulawayo the next morning, and then the folks would do the shopping and then back again in the evening. So, when I say primitive, by example, we lived on the road about 2 or 3 houses away from the edge of town, if I can put it that way. And beyond that was the strip road leading to Victoria Falls. And across the road from us, a man shot 2 lions on his front veranda one night who were trying to kill his chickens. So, what an exciting place to grow up in. It was also my first encounter, I think, with the army. With a group of friends, we used to walk around the bush after school, and great place to explore. And we came across what looked to me almost like mounds, like graves. But one of the other boys explained to me, no, this is an old army camp. There'd been some trouble on the mine, a strike or something, and the army had been called up there. And this is where they did their bayonet practice. So these were sandbags that were left lying there. I don't know how long they'd been there, probably 5 years or so. The grass had grown up between them. And I remember being quite fascinated. And this was one boy just let out a yell, charge, and pretended to stab away at these sandbags. And the impression it left with me was, boy, soldiers must be pretty angry people, wanting to go around screaming their heads off like this and, hurting people. But unfortunately, there was no high school in Wankie. So when the time came for me after a few years to attend school, my folks decided to take a transfer to Salisbury. And so we ended up traveling up there. The car was put on a flatbed truck, and our belongings were put in what they called a K car, not the helicopter one. I think it was short for cattle truck. I don't know what the abbreviation was on the railways, But we arrived there in Salisbury, and we lived in a place called Lochinvar for a number of years there. And I attended the junior school there, first of all, for a year or two, and then went to Prince Edward School. And well, Prince Edward School is a good school. I think that's putting it very, very mildly. And I was fortunate to be able to go there and to get what I thought was a very, very good education. And of course, one of the big things that attracted me at that time was the cadets on Friday afternoons. I thoroughly enjoyed that. There was an armory, and there was a row of SMLEs, well-oiled, standing there, probably from before the First World War, I don't know. And there was a chain that ran between the guard. And one of the boys would unlock this chain, and the chain would rattle as it went through the trigger guards. That sound I can still hear as I talk to you now. So, yeah, it was great. And I must say, surprisingly, Tony, when I look back, it amazes me. We had an instructor there who was just a schoolboy. Surname was Mills. I can't remember his Christian name. He went on, I think, to make a name for himself as a politician in England. Well, he lectured us one afternoon on the Bren gun, and it was fascinating to see this schoolboy holding this weapon in his hand and give us the history of it, the background. And then, he demonstrated how the thing worked, and he stripped it down and so on. And it wasn't just him. There were other occasions too when we would be in a group, and they would show us, look, if you're in a night ambush, you do this, you tie a piece of string onto your wrist, and this guy, all this old Second World War stuff, that's what it was. But it held quite a fascination for me. Unfortunately, as I explained on one of my videos, I didn't stay with the cadets at school very long. I moved over to the Sea Cadets. And so I was there for a while, and that was great. And one of the things I learned there, Tony, and not everybody will agree with me, is if you get the opportunity, never be shy to volunteer. They were always asking for volunteers at Sea Cadets, for the weekend parades. We'd go out to Lake Macawane, and there was stuff to be do there, maintenance on the launch and the cutters and that. And I was never sorry that I ever volunteered. Or we would be at the ship. It was called TS Mashona, training ship Mashona. And we would learn how to do the caulking between the planks. I don't think any boats are built like that anymore. But all these old traditional ways of maintaining these vessels in a seaworthy condition. So that always stood me in good stead. And even later, I must say, I won't labor the point, but when I was at Llewellyn, sometimes there's a bit of a transition between one company leaving and another one coming. C Company had left, and the replacements had not yet arrived. And after we were on the drill square, the staff sergeant said, guys, I need some volunteers. I'll be honest with you, it's to clean up C Company headquarters. Is there anybody here that would volunteer? Well, because I had made a sort of a standing rule for myself that I would always volunteer, I stepped forward, and one or two other guys did. But most people did what every soldier does, keep away from volunteering. So we went and cleaned up the HQ, swept, made the place nice and tidy. I was never sorry. The next day, when we formed up on the parade square, Staffy said, you and you, take the day off. So, it paid dividends. So never be, if you're a serviceman, never be scared of volunteering. That's one of the things I learned at Sea Cadets. Of course, I learned a lot of other stuff too. All old stuff, Morse code. Sometimes they would darken the ship and they'd have a light up at the front, and then the light would flash, and we would have to try and, follow the message. And semaphore, you got the flags and you're waving your arms around. Great. It's lovely stuff, Stand on the shore at Lake Macawane, and the other fellow's about, I don't know, 50, 100 paces away, and you signal each other. I love that kind of thing. It's all gone by the wayside now. Anyway, after Sea Cadets, as far as my military experience goes, it was off to Llewellyn. And that would have been in 1962, intake number 50. And it was still very old-fashioned. It wasn't like the army that most people associate with the Rhodesian Bush War at all. The uniforms were like from the Second World War, the webbing, even our voice procedure on the radios. We'd say something like, hello 11 Alpha for 11 Alpha, because in those days, good radio security was considered to be you referred to your control by your own call sign. That changed when the Bush War came. 2-1 Alpha, 2 go, and a lot of slang thrown in as well, if I might be excused for saying that. But so that changed. The weaponry changed. We had SLRs. They'd just been issued to the Federal Army at that point. So there were no 303s. But the bayonets were interesting because they looked like they were old bayonets that had just been cut down. And yeah, so, I went through all of that, boning my boots and panel beating my little brasses, and, I think we called the stuff beaver board that they had on the ceilings, and we're lucky to get a piece and put some brasso on there and then rub it and shine it up. So it was a real spit and polish army. And, finished the first phase, volunteered for armored cars in the second phase. And that was interesting because somewhere in that unit, there was somebody had served there with a tremendous imagination. We had somewhere near the armories what they called a sub-caliber range. And we went there with our Webley revolvers and so on, But in amongst the hangars, there was one hangar that was dedicated to armored cars. And it was an enchanting place. You walk in there, they had taken a 37 millimeter cannon and bored it down 2.22. So they had this thing mounted there. It wasn't in a turret, it was open, but there it was. And on the other side of the hangar was this beautiful display of hills and roads and valleys and bridges and a little, sort of a toy town effect with hidden tracks that little tanks could run on. And so when the lights were turned out and you sat behind this gun, and it's got what they call a peritele, a periscope telescope, you could look through this thing. So, there's nothing to distract you from what's around you. You're focused on that. And there's this beautiful, almost, it's like something out of a Walt Disney movie in front of you. And you get the opportunity to go through all the motions. You'd have a crew, and the car commander would call out, Travis left, steady, on, 700 yards, fire. And you'd fire, and you could see where the .22 bullet hit. So you would do your corrections and so on. And that'd be lovely to spend an afternoon there. And I don't know who did all that, but it was an enormous amount of work. But for the most time, it just stood there in darkness, locked up. One wonders at times what happened to all of this. Anyway, got through Llewellyn, and then back to Salisbury, and then to 1st Battalion, Royal Rhodesia Regiment, as it was then. Tony, I've got to be honest with you. I did not find it a happy place. In fact, it seemed, with the change of the political scene from the Federation to back to the colony again, there seemed to be a lot of uncertainty in the army there. It's like nobody really knew what to do. First, they were going to keep the armored cars. Then they were going to disband them. Then they were going to turn us all into regimental police. And in fact, I came to one parade to find one of my companions standing at the gate there with a RP armband on, and another one in his hand, which he gave to me. I said, "What's this?" He said, "You're an MP, you're an RP now." I said, "No ways, I refuse to use it." So I went and saw the adjutant, and this dear man, bless his soul, instead of yelling at me and telling me to get out there and obey orders, sort of put his head in his hands and said, "Well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What must I do with you guys?" So I'm not going to RPs. Said, "Would you be happy going to mortars?" I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll go to mortars." So we went to 3-inch mortars. Tony, have you ever kneeled behind that thing? Your poor knees get so sore. And that didn't last very long. And then we were back again with armored cars because then there'd been a change of mind. We were going to continue again. So there was this uncertainty that I felt about the whole battalion at that point. And there were other problems as well. The discipline, the standard of leadership. It was a peacetime army. So I think that there are people in life who perhaps don't make it at work in the way that they would like to. And the army offers them an opportunity of authority and being somebody. So they drift into that. But some of them really don't have the qualities of leadership that one would expect. And I found that at times, and that was a bit vexing. Not that I'm a particularly fussy guy. I hope I don't come across as that. It's just that, I'd see strange things happen, and it didn't seem to me to be the way that an army should be conducting itself. Anyway, I left there after a while, and then found myself in Five Romeo. What a difference! What an absolute difference! I've never been happier, Tony. It was the kind of place where you could leave your wallet on your steel trunk, go out on a patrol, come back, nothing would be missing. It was, and everybody there was your buddy. We were on first name terms with our officers, certainly in the company that I was in, and particularly in the platoon that I was in. We were buddies and we were comrades at arms, and we worked together very good as a team. So there I was very happy and learned a lot. And my platoon commander particularly became a very good friend of mine, and I have a lot to thank him for as far as my service career goes. Company commander too. He wasn't everybody's cup of tea, and he was rather regarded as being a bit unhinged. But that suited me fine because he got the kills, and this guy, I don't know how he did it, but he seemed to be able to sense them in the bush. We would drive along the road, and he'd be in a 2-5 up at the front, and the next minute he'd hive off into a village. There'd be gunfire shooting by the time the rest of us have turned around and come back and followed him there. 2 or 3 dead lying there. How on earth he knows that they were there, I don't know. But he had this ability, and not all our company commanders would take us on a call up and come back and say, right, well, we've got so many kills this time. But he did. So I always liked serving with him. And if I went on leave, I always told the guy in the orderly room when I come back, please put me with Tex. That was our nickname for him. And I was a man I greatly admired, and I don't know where he is today, and I'm all the sorrier for that, because I'd love to meet him again and speak to him, but I fear the worst. It's been too many years that has gone by, and no news from anybody that I've asked. My platoon commander, I'm still in touch with. I'm happy to say we're still very good friends. Came out here to Cape Town a couple of years ago. We had a great time together. And these are formed during one's time in conflict. They last forever, They really do.
Yeah.
And I have some very precious memories of the people that I served amongst. And I left Rhodesia, came back here to South Africa because I had been offered a position with the company, and at that time, it wasn't that easy to get a job. Just, like a lot of folk were leaving the country, and I considered myself fortunate to have this position. But in the process, I slowly started losing contact with all my Rhodesian friends, and in fact, a number of years went by that John Edmonds got a song that he sings. It's called "The Forgotten Soldier," and the words are, I feel like a forgotten soldier, and he sings about that. And there's many a time that I felt like that, because I got to tell you, in all honesty, I've not settled down here in this country, not a chance. I live here, I pay my taxes, I'm a good law-abiding citizen. I like to think of myself that way. But when I crossed that border and left Rhodesia behind, I left a great part of my life, and I left my spirit of patriotism there in that land. And I don't think I'll ever recapture it anywhere else again. So yeah, that's how I felt. Well, I'm an old soldier, and nobody wants. South Africans weren't interested. You know the story. They call us the Wenwies. we always start a conversation. When we were in Rhodesia, yeah, we don't want to hear about that, you know. So after a while, you zip your beak and you don't talk about stuff like that. Your family were very young at the time, so you know they have a limited interest in what you did as well. And time goes by. Then my son approached me one day, and this whole idea of a 5RR channel on YouTube, really his idea, not mine. And he said, "Dad, why don't you, just talk about a few things that, folk might find it interesting." Well, I didn't think that they'd find it interesting at all. I think that they wouldn't want to. But anyway, I went ahead. We did a couple of little episodes, and to our amazement, certainly to mine, folk seemed to like it. And so, whereas one time I had very little Rhodesian friends, now I seem to have a treasure chest full of them. Tony, they write to me from as far afield as Canada, Australia, Russia, even, and I'm overwhelmed. In fact, I can't keep up with it. It bothers me sometimes that I'm unable to. Time goes by and I haven't replied to an email, and so I haven't publicized my email address or anything like that. I've tried to just take a low profile because I'm a pretty busy guy, and for my age, and I just don't. Much as I'd love to spend more time with folk, I just don't have it. It's something I just don't possess at the moment. And then I saw on YouTube a little clip of the RLI, some parade of theirs, and I looked at this and I thought, man, this is very well produced. And I looked at John Van Sale, and I didn't know how to get hold of him, but somehow, when you track, you've got to be a little bit of a detective. So I managed to eventually get hold of John, and wrote him a little letter, and I said, I just want to commend you on this very nice little movie that you did. And he wrote back and said, hey, I'm actually one of your subscribers. So I said, oh, well, that rather flattered me, that a man of his who could produce such quality videos, was, and we became very good friends. I miss him, we in touch, we still talk, but we became very good friends. And he then introduced me to other ex-servicemen here in Cape Town. For the most part, they were regulars. And so, when I was in the army, Tony, I saw one Selous Scout in all the time that I was in Rhodesia. Now I see so many of them when I go to these functions. I'm surrounded by brown berets and ospreys, and many of them have become very good friends of mine. And yeah, you'll never be lonely if you're a Rhodesian soldier. Never.
Amen. Amen. So, tell us, Martin, can you go back to your days with 5RR? Can you expand on what you saw and experienced in your time in 5RR?
It's a strange thing. My experience was that when I was in 5RR, serving in the bush, I knew very little about what was going on as far as the war was concerned. All I knew is this is a piece of land where we operate in, and we patrol it, or we cross Craemer, we're looking for tracks, or we're doing follow-ups. And to the extent where I would sometimes not even know what another call sign in our platoon was doing. I'd get back after a patrol, say, and then maybe here or maybe not here. So essentially, we were in Operation Hurricane. If you know the escarpment at all, if you leave Sipalilo and you travel down the escarpment, you'll come to what they call a fly gate. It's called Mahui. And so from Mahui toward the east and toward the north, right up to the Zambezi, that was the sort of area that we covered. Now, it was my candid opinion at the time that there were no resident terrorists in that area. I don't believe it. It was a sort of a transit place. They'd come into the country and they would leave the country. So in both instances, they would not be looking for a punch up at all. Their idea is to get into the country, get up that escarpment, get down in amongst the farmlands or the TTLs, and then do whatever they were supposed to do. And conversely, when they left the country, the last thing they wanted was a fight with the security forces. By this time, they had plundered stores. They were carrying clothing and bottles of Coke and you name it, and this they wanted to take back home with them. So it was that kind of a war that we were fighting. Um, and when we did make contact, it was always very fleeting. Just a few seconds, shots fired, and then the bush was quiet again, and they bombshelled, left everything behind, which our African troops would help themselves to, and we'd burn the rest, never carry it back, despite special branch orders. It's so that was the nature of the war that we fought. But that wasn't the war that other guys fought there. I mean, some of those regulars, when I listened to them, I mean, that was like toe-to-toe battles. And some of them went on not for a few seconds, went on for hours and hours. Those guys can really talk about warfare from a completely different perspective. For me, it was more cat and mouse, looking for them, finding them, hoping that you could do the most damage when you do get them, and at the same time stay alive, because so if they get the drop on you, you're gone more often than not. And it happened to many of my colleagues over there. We didn't all come back home, by no means.
I found it very frustrating in the infantry, where you just seem to walk and walk and walk and walk and hope that you're going to find something, hope that you're going to find tracks, hope that an ambush succeeds. Whereas the RLI guys, they were brought into battle through OPs and that type of thing, and I really take my hat off to them. I was speaking to a very well-known Selous scout who I'm going to be interviewing in the near future, and he said, in terms of bravery, he would put the black Selous scouts at the top and the RLI second, because they were constantly in battle. Up to 5 times a day sometimes, guys having to repack their parachutes 3 times in one day. I couldn't have coped with that psychologically. Did you find that your psychological levels were ever tested? But, certainly on not that level, but what challenged you emotionally or mentally while you were on call-up?
Yeah, I hear what you say, Tony, and I've... a very good friend of mine, a lieutenant colonel, once said to me, Martin, you've got to go for counseling. I said, why? And he said, oh, you have to, you've gone through the war. I said, no, sir, I'm fine, man. He said, there's no such thing as fine. You just don't know it. And I took to heart what he said, and I thought about it, and I still think about it. And Tony, I feel psychologically unscathed by my experiences there. Honestly, they've left me with no scars that I'm aware of. To the contrary, I miss it. I miss the life. I would love nothing better to get all our papers now and to go off for 6 weeks in the bush. I'm not fit enough though, but I enjoyed it. I think it's not everybody's cup of tea, eh? And I mean, I've seen it being in a territorial force where you have conscripts. You can see the people that don't belong there, and it's agony for them, and they're worried about their families back home, and they don't want to be where they are, and they're worried about their own safety, and there's a lot of stress. So I can understand that there are folk who feel the burden of that still to this day. But praise God, I'm relieved of that. I haven't felt the need of it.
Did you ever encounter any experiences with animals? We've had some guys tell us really funny stories with animals, encounters with animals. Did you ever have anything like that on your patrols?
Well, when we get called up, they have a pre-mobilization period where they train you for a few days, And sometimes we'd have all sorts of specialists come and talk to us. And on one occasion, we had somebody from National Parks and Wildlife talking about the dangers of animals and what you how you should behave. And it got onto the subject of elephants. And he said, look, the most dangerous individual in the herd is the matriarch. You might see a great big elephant bull there, but to him, she is his little calf, and if you go near him, she will attack you. So he spoke in terms like that. And he said, these animals are committed. If you're within a certain distance of them, they will attack. They will. They're obliged to. So if you're unlucky enough to step into that area, and differs from animal to animal, you're in big trouble. And he said, what has helped in the past is that to take the initiative is just to try and frighten the beast, and so they run away. So we're in the valley, and I'm right in the front, and we're walking in the flatlands, and it's a hot day, and the guys are behind me, and I come around some bushes, and there's this elephant, maybe 10 paces away from me. Well, it got as big a surprise as I did, although I would imagine it probably knew we were there, but maybe he didn't think I would just walk up to him. And all I could think of was what that ranger said. Well, I don't want to die here, because I'd heard all kinds of stories about guys being killed by these creatures, you know. So I just shouted and held my rifle up above my head and ran at it. And it turned around and ran in a big circle like this, keeping its eye on me. And it went that way, and my guys went the other way, and I was left in the bush by myself. So I say that a bit to my shame, because I feel a bit foolish having done that, because that really was a silly thing to do. But I don't know, maybe it was the right thing. But other animals, yeah, you know, sometimes you sit and you have a smoke break, and they also come wandering up to you. I remember one day sitting there near a path. The guys were all taking a break, and here comes the skudu, ambling along, you know, minding its own business. Came right very close before it was aware of us, and it also took off. But lovely sight, you know, and you see these animals in the bush. No, the closest thing I think I got was one night when I was sleeping. I was disturbed by something. I don't know what. I wasn't on guard duty. I don't know why the guard hadn't heard it, but something came right up close to me, and I could feel its hot breath on my face. And then there was this grunt, and then the sound of this thing running through the bush away from us. I think it was some sort of pig or warthog or something. But that's the closest any wild animal came to me. Yeah, I think hornets were more of a danger.
I was based up at Vic Falls in Operation Tangent, and we had so many experiences with animals. We had one guy taken by a crocodile. I forget his name now, but he was a Gunji. I've said this before in other stories. He was a Gunji guy, and the story is that the crocodile spat him out because he tasted bad. But he swam for the shore, and he got taken back again, and eventually he stuck his fingers in the croc's eyes, and he came out, had to have 132 stitches. But that's he's now living in Nashville, in Tennessee, or wherever it is, as a musician. But his bodily hygiene left a lot to be desired, and the rumor still sticks with him that the croc spat him out. We had another guy, Eddie, I think his name was. He was bitten in the face by a hyena and had to have reconstructive surgery. We had another one where a lion attacked guys in an ambush, and they shot it dead just a few feet from their machine gun. We had problems with snakes, but the beauty of the African bush was I walked around a corner once, and there was a male and a female lion on a patch of green grass next to a river inlet, just sort of playing with their paws on each other's faces. It was absolutely beautiful. But then they sensed us and ran off. And I think the most frightening experience for me was when this female elephant came out of the Zambezi River with its calf. We saw this at sunset, and later on at about 10 o'clock that night when the moon was up, this thing had wandered close towards us and sensed us, and in defense of its baby, it went ballistic. Now you can imagine if you're on guard duty, you're awake and conscious, but when you wake up to having an elephant trumpeting next to you was horrifying. And the guy to the right of me, Yanni Karlitz, he was in such a hurry to get away that he kept his legs in the sleeping bag and he hopped away like in a beanbag. It was so I was rolling around with laughter at the same time as being terrified this elephant cow was going to stand on us. But eventually it took off when a guy lying next to me just hammered the magazine, made a noise like that going, "Hi, hi," and off it went. And the last story I can think of is an elephant was very aggressive towards guys in an ambush position, and they had to shoot it in the head. And that thing it must have run 45 kilometers before it dropped dead. It was eventually found by national parks. But it was a lively place, but a beautiful place to sit under a tree and watch the monkeys up in the canopy and to watch the eland and the sable with their beautiful curved horns. What a beautiful place to have done my service, So
Yeah.
I think that's what fills our blood as white Africans, is that beautiful bush. It was just so magnificent, and the stars at night. I'll never forget them.
Yeah, it's
So,
true.
Martin, I believe, listening to one of your podcasts, that you were actually downgraded medically and you weren't allowed into the army to begin with. How did you overcome that?
Yeah, I was permanently medically discharged from the army, and Tony, I had to really. I think it was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my life, is fight my way back into there. It's not easy, but praise God, there were people who had a bit of trust in me, and I did get back in, and had a very good career after that. I think
Oh.
So yeah.
Did you manage to get any rank at all, or were you a troopy the whole way through? Did you manage?
Sorry?
Did you manage to get any rank?
I ended up as a corporal, and that satisfied me. I was a temporary sergeant for a while, but Tony, I did not want a base job, and I certainly didn't want to. I would never have considered going for an officer selection, because I didn't want to be away from what I considered to be the action. I wanted to be in the bush, and I wanted to be doing that, not organizing trucks and rations and ammunition and stuff like that. So I was not administratively inclined at all. So now I'm very satisfied that I ended up as a corporal. That's fine for me. That's good. I didn't want more.
And how did you obviously led guys on patrols as a corporal? How did you feel about that, leading other men? Did you worry about you fluffing it up for them and that type of thing?
Sorry, Tony, could you say that again?
Yeah. How did you feel about leading other guys in the bush? You obviously led patrols. Did you ever feel that you were concerned leading other men and keeping the safety of their lives in your hands?
It's look, it's a responsibility, and it's your mind's got to be on the job. There's so much that can go wrong, and even a simple thing like map reading can end up in a disaster. And I've seen it with my own eyes, where call signs in my own platoon walked into each other one night, and the results are devastating because nobody gives way. So even a simple thing like that, if I had a night march coming up, I would sit the whole afternoon by myself, memorizing the maps, closing my eyes, trying to imagine what the skyline would look like at night at any point along that route, so that I wouldn't be caught off sides. And as I said, praise God, I managed to get all the way through the war. I never lost one guy, and that is not because of me, but that's because of providence. God decides these things, and but I did my part as much as I could, and I tried to look after them as well. Toward the end of the war, it was only myself, and then the rest would be black soldiers, and some of them, would get themselves into trouble, and there's not an awful lot you can do in the way of representing them to try and get them out of the mess that they've created themselves. But as much as you can do, you try and do. So, if I had a spare pair of tackies, I'd give it to the guy if his footwear didn't look good, or because our kits started wearing out very badly toward the end. Things were not good. I don't think everybody realizes it. Even when it comes to food, we were we were very short. Most of the time, that last call up or two that I did, the farmers in the area looked after us. They would come with basket loads of vegetables and stuff for us. But from the army, the fresh rats that the ration packs that we used to bury in a trench and set on fire and leave in the bush, those days were gone. You did not get a ration pack unless you were actually on operations and if you went on patrol. And there was none of this one pack a day kind of thing, help yourself. We expected to make that thing last at least 2 days. And if we could make it last longer, all the better. So we all suffered a little bit. Even our weaponry started wearing out a little bit. Quite a few times I'd have to say to the Sergeant Major, my weapon's falling to pieces. I'd like to exchange it for something else. And he would have to do this. Our vehicles started showing signs of wear. I mean, Tony, there's more than one occasion where a vehicle would be hit in an ambush, not one of our vehicles, and it would be brought to us because we were so short of vehicles, and it would still have broken glass and blood on the sandbanks at the back, and we'd have to try and clean this up before we could use it. It was a tough army in the end, eh? Things weren't easy.
No, I agree with you. Did you or any of your guys set a landmine?
Oh, yeah, well, nobody got hurt by that, but we were based on a farm, a strange name of Annie Oakley, I think the name of the farm was, and it was a deserted farm, but we based ourselves up there, and there was a little hill, maybe not even 500 meters away from us. And these guys were on the hill, and they'd been watching us all afternoon, and that night they put a landmine down. And as the truck pulled out of the driveway in the morning, the 4-5, it went over this landmine and it took off the wheel. But our platoon sergeant, Rex Aid, never a man to be put out by anything like that. He repaired that vehicle and drove it off again, just bent the brake pipes over and so on. But he could actually put that wheel back again on that 4-5. We were also in other parts of the Sipalilo area. We drove up to a store, went inside, bought a couple of Cokes. I was talking to some of the locals there. The driver reversed the truck, ready for us to move off again. Bang, an almighty explosion, just within meters of us, front driver's wheel off. But luckily he was okay. So, we did have landmines.
Did any of the farmers in your area come under attack? Did you have to protect any of them? Did any of the farmers in your area, the white farmers, did they come under attack?
Oh, yeah. Oh, Tony, oh boy, I got to tell you, at one time from Centenary right up to the Zambezi River, from Karoi over to Mount Darwin, that's a massive piece of land. The only troops there was our company. And they at that time, I think a full company, I doubt if it amounted to 60 men. But it was only for a short space. It was maybe like for about 2 or 3 days that the army was in this position. I don't know where all the other troops were, but we had to look after that area, and we couldn't. So the company commander withdrew everybody off patrol, off follow-ups. We didn't even follow spur or anything, and put us all on farms as protection. And that particular night that I'm talking about, I stood on the balcony, on the stoop of this one farm where we were, and it was like Guy Fawkes. You could hear a farm being attacked over there on that corner of the horizon, and then it would start there, then it would be there. It went on the whole night, and you could just hear gunfire, and you could, it lasted for hours. No, the farmers are amazing. I mean, the things they put up with, and most of them were members of Patu, And my experience of them, very, very favorable. I mean, they were excellent frontline troops, and some of them I still remember by name, and they accounted for many, many kills in the area. Did a sterling job looking after their families. No, it was very tough being a farmer. I take my hat off to them. It's easy being a soldier. You got all your buddies around you. You got guards at night. Imagine you're on your own with your family, and the night is dark out there, and it's bravery of another order.
Did you ever encounter other troops like Guard Force or Internal Affairs on those farms? Because I've interviewed guys recently, and they were also tasked to go onto European farms. Did you ever meet any of them?
Oh, sometimes we'd even work with them. Internal Affairs on one occasion. There was a very hurried follow-up that had been organized. Somebody had found spoor, and all we had available was one call sign of 4 men. And so Internal Affairs were asked to assist. So they ended up with a call sign of about, and Partridge joined them as well. Must have been about 20 guys on that follow-up, but it was an almighty punch-up and quite a few guys killed. And the result, it happened because one of the Internal Affairs guys accidentally had a discharge as they were climbing up the side of a gomo, and that alerted the terrorists. So yeah, we did have some dealings with them, not much, but we did come across them, from time to time.
And what would you say was your most challenging or frightening moment in the army?
My scariest moment, Tony. We were due to go on a sweep one morning, and the whole company had been mustered for this, but it was still too early to start off. It was still nighttime, so we ended up, the sweep line ended up outside a school, and we spent most of the night there lying. But just right in front of us, to our immediate front of my call sign, was an ablution block. And sometime during the night, one of my men said to me, "There's somebody in there. I heard movement." And are you sure? I said, "Yeah." So two of us went forward, myself and him, and we get to the door of this ablution block. Now it's very dark. It's almost pitch black inside there. And I thought, well, it doesn't seem right for me to tell him to go in there, so I suppose I better do it. No good, both of us going in. So I stepped through that doorway into that dark place there, and that I don't think I've been more terrified in my life, quite honestly. It was the first time I've ever spoken about it, but I fully expected to get pulled that night. But there was nothing; it was empty when I went from stall to stall and looked. But that was very, very scary. Yeah.
Yeah, those type of things tend to set your adrenaline going, don't they? When did you start to notice that things were winding down and getting bad? What year did you leave Rhodesia?
I left beginning of '79. What happened, Tony, was that we were at Sonoya. We'd been called up, and the stick leaders were asked to attend a meeting at the police station. So we all went there in the evening, and the doors were closed, and somebody lectured us, and I don't know who this man was. There were two or three of them. I think one of them was in civis. They did not introduce themselves in that. And they said to us, "Look, we got something to tell you guys, and you need to take it with a great deal of circumspection, and maturity and understanding. We can't control the country anymore. We are being overwhelmed. So what we've done is we have reached an accord with some of the guerrillas, and we are going to put them in charge of certain areas, but they'll be working under the control of a specialist. Mostly it was the Zulu Scouts." So he then explained to us about Comrade Max, who would be the man that we would most likely have dealings with. We were going, and area was next to where we were going to operate, and we were told, if you find spoor leading in the direction where his area is, you are to abandon it. You're not allowed to follow it. And that really that bothered me immensely. I was unprepared for that. It just sounded so much to me like defeat, and I thought none of this makes sense. These guys are, are, are terrorists. Why do you expect them now to be behaving any differently? And believe me, it wasn't just that they were given an area; they were given rations and pay and all the rest, and they became known as auxiliaries. Now, when that was made known, for the rest of that call up, I was very worried. That troubled me immensely. And then I thought, no, I can't stay here, because it seems to me like the army has lost it. The army leadership is losing some sort of direction. Either they're yielding to political pressure here, or what. And then there was a piece in the newspaper, in the Herald, saying that there'd been a meeting at Ndabadingi Sitoli's house. Now, Sitoli lived near me, not very far away, down the road. And so the Rhodesian army was represented there, and the police and everybody else who had positions of influence and authority. And Sitoli told the Herald reporter that at some stage he slipped out of the house, went around the side, peeped in through the study window, and saw one of the senior army officers and one of the senior comrades opening up a bottle of whiskey and toasting each other. Well, that did it for me. As soon as I read that in the paper, I was on the phone. I phoned 5RR first of all. Nobody there knew what I was talking about. I phoned Army HQ. I spoke to Lieutenant Colonel Norman Wood about it. He said, well, just relax for a minute. I don't know what this is about either. I said, but, sir, what is going on? Why are we fraternizing with the enemy to this point now where we are actually toasting their good health? So then I got a call from 5RR again saying, come and see us. So I said, no, I've come to terms with it. I'm leaving the country. I'll be packing it in. And they said, no. We'll come and see you and talk to you, which was very nice of that officer. But I was too hasty in a way, but I was not happy. And that's what brought about me leaving the country. It was totally dissatisfaction with the way the war was being prosecuted.
What do you think, in your opinion, could have been done better or more to have made our side more successful, the end results different? What do you think we could have done?
Tony, that's a very hard question. And I have at times, thought about it. To me, I found that our security was very lax. That was my opinion. We'd be called together and say, look, it's hearts and minds now. We've got to try and win their hearts and minds. So from now on, if you're driving along the road and you see a group of locals, please stop and give them a lift and ask them where they want to go. And in this way, we'll be friends with them, and then they'll tell us everything that they know about the terrorists. Well, I didn't quite subscribe to that way of thinking, and it was a real problem for me. And we would drive along, the truck would stop, and the driver would, and many times, human nature is so, ridiculous sometimes. The guy didn't want to go anywhere. I'm going to visit my troll. I'm quite happy. No, get on, we'll give you a lift, insisting upon it. Now, there's any number of radios on the back of that truck that are on. There's messages coming in where guys need to be picked up, where guys need to be picked up. And this bloke sitting there. And I think to myself, you fellas sitting here in this truck, you think he's stupid. He's not stupid. He's listening to all of this. We mustn't think that the enemy is just like, gormless. There's some very bright people there amongst them. And that bothered me. And I ended up having an altercation with the driver on one occasion, and my own stick leader at that time told me to back off and toe the line. And this is what needed to be done. So I saw it on many levels where guys were not careful. I think the Gooks knew more about what was going on than we think that they knew. So, I never saw the armies function in that way. that undoubtedly it should have been done much more of it. Perhaps the police should have been the agency, internal affairs certainly, these other units that we had, but not the army. The army is the iron fist in the in the velvet glove. You know, they can't be seen to be weak, and I think that we were very weak and compromising in some respects. But you know, I really, that is only my opinion. I know that a lot of soldiers were dissatisfied. I'm not the only one. In fact, there was a political movement that started up at that time amongst the soldiers called the Rhodesian Action Party, and you know, they were very emphatic about the fact that there needs to be a harder line taken. Um, I remember speaking to one of the ministers of defense at a meeting arranged by the RAP, and he was, you know, and I was saying, well, why don't we get down to doing something and really just like fighting this war and be done with it? You know, it's just dragging on and on. And he said, oh, my hands are tied. He said, we can only do so much. I was fortunate when I came to South Africa to be introduced to a man in Belleville one day, and I was told, you're from Rhodesia? Yes, this gentleman is also from Rhodesia. I'd like you to meet him. And I looked at him and I thought, I know this face. I know this guy. And to my surprise, it was Des Frost, the chairman of the Rhodesia Front. And I have to tell you, Tony, that we became very good friends. He's an excellent man, and I got to know him well. He's passed on now, but sometimes in his unguarded moments, he would talk about things that were going on in that country, which were not good. Hey, I mean, they were agitating even against him, and for the life of me, I can't think why anybody would want to find any fault with him. We read of cases where people had to leave the country because suddenly special branch was showing a special interest in them. And you know, I've got to tell you, you know, I started getting a funny feeling when I was in the bush, and I don't know what started it, but I thought to myself one day, you know, I'm getting a bit worried about our military intelligence. I hear a lot about them, but nobody has ever come to me and said, here's a location statement, all right? This is a Gomo. There are 12 on top of that hill there. They've been there for the last 2 weeks. Go and nail them. Nothing like that ever came from Army intelligence. And I began to wonder, why is this? And I began to, and believe me, Tony, I regarded myself as becoming crazy over this matter. If I went to a place where there'd been a feeding and the guy was standing here for military intelligence, and he'd say, all right, okay, yes, I've questioned them. There were so many here, and they did this and this, and they had so many pots of suds with them, and they've gone off in that direction. Fine. I mean, you can go. Oh, when you're going to start? It's all right. I'll just sit down there, and I'll sit until he gets into his kudu or whatever he calls that little car of his and clears off. Then I'll call the elders, and I'll question them myself, and I'll verify everything that I've heard. I won't just set off on the he says so. And, you know, I was like this until just a few years ago when I started meeting regulars and I started listening to some of the stories there, and I began to see, hey, man, not the only one who was feeling this way. Though with a situation like that, Tony, it cannot come right. You know, those are fundamental things that had to be in place. Your security, your loyalty, your patriotism, all of those things had to be in place if you wanted to make a success of it. And even then, you know, I don't know what the answer is, because the settlers went there. They found a country that was a wilderness. They stopped slavery. They introduced education, medical attention, all sorts of things. There wasn't much money. The BSA, British South Africa Company, wasn't a business that was loaded with unlimited funds. It was a sacrifice on the part of the colonialists to build that country up. And yet there's been no gratitude expressed for that, only condemnation. That you people came here, you stole our land, you did all this. And how do you fight against an idea like that? When the evidence is there that you've done what you possibly can with the limited resources that you have to try and uplift a nation has been left behind by history, and still they're opposing you. So maybe there is no answer. Although I've waffled a lot and said a lot, maybe the end was inevitable.
Well, when you consider that the African people hadn't actually marked their boundaries, we could say, well, which was your land? You know, we could let a Nigerian come down to Zimbabwe and say, this is my land because I'm African. You know, it was only when the white colonial boundaries were implanted that now the African nationalists could say, oh, well, that's my land up in Karoi and this is my land. They had no markings.
Yes.
They had oral history, and yes, they had communion with the spirits in that area, but it didn't demarcate a physical piece of land. And
Good
what's
point.
more, I spoke to a very old hunter when I was at Wankie in the officers' mess. I spoke to this old guy. I can't remember what his name was, but he was a major, and he was very old, in his 80s, 90, and he had been employed to shoot out all the game in Mashonaland North because no farmer could move into that area because of the tsetse fly. And so for 20 or 30 years, all he did is shoot game. Just he got so sick of it in the end, he became a conservationist. But by doing that, the animals were pushed north almost into the valley, and the fly was killed, and all of those screens were put up with the black Hessian, and the fly was moved out. And then farmers came in and chopped the trees down to expose the land and pulled the rocks out and started farming and turned into magnificently successful farmers, in that Karoi area and all that sort of stuff. But none of that, as far as I know, and I'm prepared to be corrected, none of it, no person could live on it because of the tsetse fly. So for people to turn around 100 years later and say, oh no, but that was our land, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't. It was like when the whites arrived in South Africa, the Bantu tribes from up north had only arrived 180 years before the white man from up in the Kenya area. And I think there was the Bushmen and the Khoi tribe, I think it was, in the Cape. And there were very, very few Africans in there. It was this vast wilderness. And I think it's just become a political game to say, oh, that was my land. That was, it's not your land and blah, blah, blah. But what can we do about it? We're on the losing end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Martin, it's been a great talk. And I'd like to thank you for coming on. I'd like to point our viewers in the direction of your podcast, which is Five Romeo Romeo, 5RR. How many talks have you done so far?
I'm not sure, Tony. I think there's probably maybe 60. I'm not sure, perhaps. Yeah.
What astounds me is how many viewers you get. I mean, we're chuffed if we get 10,000 and you're up to like 20,000 per episode.
I think there's just over 20,000 subscribers, and
Yeah.
I don't know how many views. I've left my son to manage all that side of it, so he takes care of that.
Yeah, but your chats are very interesting. I don't know what the word is for you. Is acerbic the right word? Where you have an analytical mind that analyzes things and exposes them and gets us to think about things we've never heard before. My English teacher will probably haunt me tonight and say it's not the right word, but you're an interesting fellow, and I would encourage people to go and listen to your podcasts. And I would like to please encourage people to come forward and volunteer to talk on fighting men in Rhodesia, particularly regulars. We're very short of regulars willing to speak. It's a real mission for me to persuade them and John to come and talk, and we need you guys for our history to be recorded. So please do that. Many guys say they don't want to dig up the past, but it's very therapeutic to talk on this program, and many guys have told me that. So Thank you very much for coming on, Martin, and I wish you all the best going forward and with your podcast and your private life.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege.
Okay. Cheers, Martin. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. God bless.